Thank you, Chair. Councillor Neil Buckley, All Woodley Ward.
Councillor Linda Richards, Wetherby Ward.
Councillor Matthew Robinson from the Harewood Ward.
And would you like to just introduce yourselves that are here also?
Thank you, Chair. Andy Birkbeck, Localities Programme Manager from the Safer Stronger Communities team.
Thank you, Chair. Ian Moore, Leeds City Council Highways Asset Manager.
Good evening, Toby Russell, Governance Services and Clerk to the committee.
Thanks, Chair. Matharu, Localities Officer, Communities, Leeds City Council.
Thank you. Can we run through agenda items 1 to 6, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Under agenda item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under item number 2, there are no items which require the exclusion of the press or the public. Under item number 3, there has been supplementary information submitted in relation to item 11, the finance report. Under agenda item number 4, apologies for absence had been received from Councillor Lamb, and I believe we're still waiting for a few other members, which would be Councillor Cohen, Councillor Harrand, Councillor Firth, and I believe Stevenson has also given his apologies prior to the meeting.
Thank you.
And yeah, agenda item number 5, could I ask members to declare any interest they may have? Thank you. And for item number 6, the open forum, I'm unaware of any proposed items of business for them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Toby. And as there are no members of the public here, we'll take it that there aren't any items for the open forum. Minutes of the previous meeting is item number 7. Can these minutes be accepted as a correct record? Yes, thank you. And then item number 8, matters arising for the minutes. Are there any matters that you wish to raise? Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 9 is highways, the annual improvement consultation. So I'm going to invite Ian Moore to present this item, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just put a brief presentation up on screen if I may. Okay. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to come along to the community committee. This is the first time as highways we've brought an item of this type to the community committees. I have previously visited each of the other committees. Obviously this meeting was rescheduled. It's on the back of every year we carry out a consultation with elected members and parish councils with regards to our Forward Works annual refurbishment programme. What I wanted to do this year, and it perhaps become more apparent in a moment, I wanted to come along to the community committees because what we've done traditionally is we send out a request partway through the year, an email to all members with a list of the provisional programme for the following year and 2 or 3 years thereafter, and we ask for feedback in terms of, are there any streets perhaps that we've missed, or are there any streets that maybe we've put in a particular delivery year that as elected members you may wish to see accelerated, or you may have knowledge that perhaps we're not in possession of. And then generally what we do is we close the consultation, we try to factor in as much of the information that we've had, and then we write back to members later in the year with, here is the list that we intend to take to seek approval early in the following year. I'm conscious that, you know, we would then occasionally get comments because members hadn't had the opportunity to see the final lists sooner. So what I thought I'd do is come along this year to each of the community committees with the relevant lists, and at this stage feedback on what information we have had, what requests we've had, what questions we've received, and are there any more before we then start to finalise the lists ready for sharing back to ward members later in the year. So it's a bit of a mop up really to make sure that we haven't missed anything. But just before I move on to that, I thought it may be useful. I've got a 6 or 7 slide presentation that just gives any new members or any members who've been on the council for quite some time, gives them a bit of a background, a bit of an update on why we produce the lists in the way that we do and why we go about the processes that we actually do. So as I say, it's only 6 or 7 slides, so hopefully it shouldn't take too long. Okay, so as I say, 2 main real aims today. One is to give you that bit of a background and feedback in terms of what we are looking at in terms of the consultation this year, which closed on the 2nd of September. Hence the reason I spent September going to the various committees. And as I say, I think probably most importantly to give members an opportunity. Is there anything we've missed? Is there anything that they've thought of more recently? So that I can take that away and we can look to feed that in as best we can. By way of the process that we as highways and transportation, and in particular asset management, go through, perhaps as you'd expect as an engineering discipline, we do have a code of practice. In our case, it's called the Well-Managed Highway Infrastructure Code of Practice. And it's a document that was produced on behalf of the DFT, Department for Roads and Transport, by the UK Roads Liaison Group on their behalf. And it was published back in October of 2016. So that is very much considered to be the code by which we should seek to deliver the service in its broader sense, and some elements are very specific. There's 36 recommendations. The ones that are particular to the annual programme and feed in very much and have a direct effect on the annual programme. One is life cycle planning. So, we don't simply take a road or a footway. It's been built and we then wait until, it's at the end of its life. There is absolutely an expectation that we will intervene at various times with various treatments in order to get the maximum life that we can out of any section of the highway. We also have to carry out inspections. So for asset management, we do engineers inspections. It's a small team that specifically go out looking at the road and footway condition with a view to trying to take an engineering view on where we feel the level of deterioration is and what the most appropriate approach in terms of that particular section of highway is. And then we also have safety inspections. So I've got a team of 11 safety inspectors who are going round on a regular basis, looking specifically for defects and what measures need to be taken in order to keep the highway safe. We absolutely take a risk managed based approach. So not everything we do is cyclical. That can on occasion lead to situations where there may be a perceived risk or a resident may be particularly concerned about a particular location. But when we risk manage that, we feel that the risk is such that it can be left a little bit longer, or maybe the treatment isn't as significant as perhaps somebody else may think. So we do absolutely risk manage, and that is in some ways influenced by the funding that we have available. And as I've already mentioned, we do absolutely have to repair defects as and when we find them. From my perspective, in terms of the funding that I have available to me, there are 2 key streams. One of them is the CRSTS budget, the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlements. That's a relatively new budget in the sense that traditionally I used to receive an element of highway maintenance block monies from the DFT. There was an element of incentive fund monies. Occasionally we'd get, more recently, pothole fund monies, and they'd all come in perhaps separately, but they'd all go into the same network in terms of trying to keep it in as best a condition as we possibly can. Since we moved to a mayoral authority, that has all been consolidated. And as you'll see in a moment, we now have a 5-year settlement, which before we never had. Literally, we were working year on year with an element of what would perhaps be in years 2 and 3. But the CRSTS settlements, one, it's slightly bigger. It's in the region of around £10 million for this year. And for the 4 years thereafter, it'll increase to about 11. And as I say, that is one amount of money rather than individual elements. And the second element that I'm fortunate enough to have is the Leeds capital element. So that's specifically Leeds money. And that's the budget that covers the work we do on the annual programme. So the local roads, that equates to about 72% of our network, and the £13 million that I receive annually is largely spent on that aspect of the network. So the element that we're consulting on. As a code of practice, it is important to keep in mind that it's not a statutory requirement, but certainly, you know, when we are defending a claim, for example, being able to demonstrate that we're working in accordance with a nationally recognised code of practice does stand us in good stead. Another recommendation that's absolutely critical to what we do is there is absolutely an expectation on the part of the DFT that we have a policy and a strategy document, and we do have, and they are available on the internet. They were first produced in 2016 to coincide with the launch of the well-managed highway document, and we did recently refresh both of those documents again to fall in line with the new mayoral authority. But I think what's key to both the policy and the strategy document is they have to tie into the council's wider corporate vision. In terms of the refresh that we carried out, they're the three key elements that we looked at and either enhanced or we introduced. So as I mentioned, very much now there's a regional context, how what we do in Leeds on the network ties in with the wider West Yorkshire transport strategy, you know, and other key documents and strategies that exist, not just specific to Leeds, but we work very closely with neighbouring authorities around things like the key route network and so on. As you'd expect, sustainability and climate emergency is very much front and centre. So for me, it's around connecting Leeds travel strategy. How does what we do in asset management tie into the council's wider vision of being a city where you no longer need a car, for example? What does that mean for cycle paths and footpaths as distinct from the roadway, for example? But we've also got to keep in mind, obviously, you know, other modes of transport that we want people to move on to. And I think this third element is ultimately what prompted me to feel it was appropriate to come along to the community committees in this way, and that's around effective communication and engagement. You know, as elected members, you often have a much better idea as to what's going on within the wards, and it's important that we continue to engage and get that information so we can feed that into the wider programme. As with anything, it's what we do is not without its challenges. I don't intend to go through all of those numbers, but the ones that are key on there. So on the left-hand side, I've circled a couple of numbers, and that's specifically around this relationship between what we do in terms of preventative treatments and what we do in terms of refurbishments. So your preventatives are your surface dressing, your micro asphalt treatments, things like that. And more recently, we're looking at what we call rejuvenators and other potential opportunities that will prolong the life of a carriageway and a footway that's already in good or is still in good condition. And then obviously the second element is the refurbishment, where we are coming in and we completely dig up and relay a road effectively from scratch. Now you'll see those numbers there, the 301 compared to 134. There's quite a difference there between we are carrying out more preventative works than we are refurbishment. And that's quite simply because we can get an awful lot more done in terms of surface dressing and those types of treatments than we can if we do a full refurbishment. So that does often mean that members of the public will perhaps see that they will feel we're resurfacing a road that's already in good condition or still in good condition. What we're looking to do is to maintain that condition. The frustration then can be there may be a road nearby that's in a poor condition. Why aren't we dealing with that one? In some ways, it's as I say, it's the funding that we have available and the decisions that we take to try and prolong the condition of the network as best we can for as long as we can. That said, ultimately, we have a situation in Leeds where we have a managed decline. So what that means in real terms is every street, every section of 250 metre section of street is split into red, amber, green. And we have 115 streets that each year are falling into the next band. So green into amber, amber into high amber, and then sadly amber into red. So with the funding that we have available, we still have a situation where, you know, we have a number of streets that are deteriorating quicker than we can address them. I've mentioned communication, that it's key, I feel, to what we do. We do have a communication strategy. Again, that is available online, and we do refresh that, but that looks to capture all stakeholders, not just elected members, you know, parish councils, members of the public, and so on and so forth. And as part of that, and I appreciate there's an awful lot of detail on screen, but I thought it'd be useful just to demonstrate some of the changes and improvements that hopefully we have made in the recent past. So the sheet on the left hand side is a copy of one of the lists that you would have received back in 2016, for example, and it basically sets out in very simple terms, these are the streets that we're planning to do, whether it's curbs, footway, carriageway, or whether it's a surface dressing. And it doesn't really tell you any more than that. In trying to give you more information to assist you in both feeding back to the team, but also understanding why we've taken some of the decisions, we've done a few things that hopefully the one on the right hand side, we've introduced the color coding, so you can see which we believe is red, which is amber. As you'd expect, we wouldn't put any streets that are green on there because they're in a good condition. And we've also added to the bottom of the list, we used to just put on the streets that we had funding to deliver on. And we'd often get asked, well, what about such and such of the street? So I've taken the decision to include on the bottom that we have those streets that we believe are actionable, but as it stands, we don't have the funding available to allocate them into a particular year. Now, that for me also forms a part of the consultation, because there may be streets that have yet to be allocated that you may feel as members you'd like to see accelerated. So it was important that we gave you as full a picture as possible, and hopefully those improvements will have done that. I think this is me last slide, just to kind of conclude. In terms of where we want to be, and despite what I've just said about the lack of funding and so on, we are making progress. Ultimately, we want to get to a position where we have steady state as opposed to managed decline. And what that means for Leeds is the little chart there where we talk about principal roads, distributor roads, and unclassified. Put them to one side for now. They're in generally good condition. It's the local access roads, the ones that we consult on, where we've got a greater number, 72% of the network, and we need to get to a position where less than 10% of those streets are in a poor condition, and we're not quite there yet. So, you know, that is absolutely an aspiration, something that we're working towards. That said, the chart on the right hand side, you can see the way it's tailed off, and then in terms of green has come back and improved. And that is largely due to the amount of preventative work that we're doing, that we're stopping streets that were amber becoming high amber or red. We still look to undertake work on streets that are red, because we need to at least control that. But ultimately, the more green we've got on there, and if we can eliminate the amber elements, that will then free up funds to start to tackle and eradicate as soon as we possibly can the red. But there will always be elements of that whilst we have the situation that we have. So hopefully that's given you a quick run through of why we take some of the decisions. But I guess now it's back to the main reason why I'm here this evening, and that is around what we've had so far in terms of this year's consultation. We've received a request from Alwoodley Parish Council with regards to Primley Park Mount in terms of accelerating that up the programme, which we will be looking to do. And Councillor Richards also sent in a request for an explanation around what we mean when it says KFC. And I think there's quite a lengthy, well, I've seen the email response that went back, it was quite lengthy. And it then expanded to talk about Tenter Hill and Clifford Moor Road, amongst others, in terms of what does KFC, curb, footway and carriageway mean for those particular streets. Beyond that, if there's any more streets that that you want me to absolutely make sure are considered ready for finalising the forward programme, then I would dearly like to take that information away.
Presumably, colleagues can actually get in touch with you and email you that if they've got anything you fairly quickly.
Yes, that's certainly one option. We have a generic email address, so we've included. So the email that went out originally on the 11th of July, that has a generic email address, which is highways.service.planning@leeds.gov. So you can either email that generic email or you can email me directly, and then we can then look to factor that in and accommodate as many as we can when we come to finalise the programme.
Thank you, Ian. Are there any questions? Matthew?
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, thanks for that, Ian. That's useful. I'm going to try and take this in two strands, if that's okay. It's sort of a line of question about the combined authority and some of the conversations that go on there, and then more about the local element, if that's all right. So you mentioned there that, and it's welcome news that thanks to the deal the government did and the devolution deal, that there's more money coming in to the region. So I think that's to be welcomed. The combined authority has talked about a mass transit system for the city. In terms of your role as Highways Asset Manager, what conversations have happened about that mass transit system so far?
So I've certainly been invited to contribute into those conversations. One of my team attends a group that's been set up specifically to oversee the delivery of the mass transit. So he will feed in terms of what do the proposals mean for the city council in the longer term. Is it maintainable? Are the materials appropriate? So we do have a direct input into the development of the mass transit scheme and its delivery, because ultimately it will be my team that will be making decisions around its maintenance.
So on that, if that's so once that mass transit system is in place, and presumably it is a on the road system that's being discussed at the moment, it's not something that's off road, the maintenance sits with you rather than the combined authority or the transport body that's set up afterwards for the highway itself.
As far as I'm aware, those specifics are still to be agreed. What I need to make sure is at this stage we are feeding into that dialogue, so that ultimately wherever the responsibility ends up in terms of its maintenance, if it is with Leeds, we feel we're in a position to maintain it. But in terms of how it will be maintained and operated, as far as I'm aware, those decisions are still to be taken.
I'm just aware, Chair, that the commitment at combined authority is that by and whoever the mayor is, I imagine that will be the case, that in the 2027 will be see spades in the ground. 2022, 2023 now. I anticipate those conversations are going to be live, and we need some clarity on it probably quite quick. Similarly, on that, so when's a cycleway is included in the plan here? So any cycle lanes or anything like that?
As far as I'm aware, they are, but I can certainly get you more detail on that.
And there's an absence of A roads as well. So the A58 is a classic example, runs from sort of edge of Leeds outside my ward all the way through to the Weatherby ward as well. We have, as councillors, continually talked about the state of the A58 and the maintenance of it. And there's a little bit of pass the parcel that goes on when it comes to sort of the gullies, the verges, the curbing that's there. It's, well, you know, that's actually gullies, so that should be street cleansing that's gone on. You know, what coordination happens when it comes to aspects like that? Because ultimately, if the road isn't maintained and the roads aren't clean, they're swept. And I was coming through the Councillor Buckley will laugh at this because we talk about it all the time. There was basically a tree that was growing out of the curb in one area that I came to, and it clearly had not been swept in a long time. That undermines your maintenance program if that doesn't happen. So what's that? How does that accountability process work?
So I guess by definition, the title of the team, the Highways Asset Management Team, if there isn't a very clear place for a particular aspect of the of the infrastructure to sit, then ultimately that will come through the asset management team. So several members of my team do spend an awful lot of time consulting with Parks and Countryside, gullies you mentioned, for example. So the delivery of the gully service sits with our DLO, but we will liaise with them on a daily basis where we receive inquiries around a particular location. Or if, for example, we've carried out a safety inspection or an engineer's inspection and we've identified a defect, asset management will then feed that information through to the relevant team. We do work quite closely with an awful lot of teams. There are elements where there's perhaps an opportunity that we would want to explore for those teams to be more reactive, more proactive, sorry, in terms of the work that they do. So one aspect that we're looking at the moment is the use of artificial intelligence. So we've got some of my vans fitted with mobile phones, basically, that when we carry out a safety inspection, the roads being videoed, one of the key benefits we see of the use of that artificial intelligence, as well as it picking up defects automatically, we will then be able to share that information with, for example, colleagues in Parks and Countryside and other teams, so that they can see much easier where there are defects that they would be expected to respond to. But in essence, it's being coordinated through the asset management team.
Because I'm always slightly concerned. Sorry, Chair, just there were no other questions. I mean, just indulging in a dialogue. Here. But I'm always slightly concerned when we talk about AI, because that gets reported back. But unless there's officers picking things up at the other end and actioning it, then that isn't going to get delivered. And that's always my concern. It goes into the great big system that's there, and it's the concern when residents report potholes and defects and things. It goes into the system, and it might go on the forward plan. I mean, there's some streets on here that I've been a councillor long enough that they're coming around for the second time to be resurfaced. I don't know what the life is of the job that's done. Whereas there's other streets that are in 24, 25 that have never been done in my memory that's on there as well. So I'm not quite understanding some of that hierarchy that's in there either.
Well, just in terms of the question about artificial intelligence, you're absolutely right. There's no point implementing the system if the information that we then have access to sits there and nobody is available to do anything with it. So that is something that we are incorporating as part of the trials that we've undertaken, and how will both members of staff within the asset management team utilise that opportunity, and also how will colleagues in other teams utilise the opportunity that we are creating for them. And there is an expectation that the system that we are actually utilising at the moment, it's very easy to access. And certainly we do liaise with those teams to make sure that, you know, they are aware of how they can do that so that they can use it to the best possible opportunity. I mean, in terms of streets, if there's any particular streets that you want to share with me, either now or at some point in the near future. But okay,
I think
but generally the hierarchy, I don't know. So one of the last charts that was on screen, it made reference. I think you might have noticed it talked about 4B and so on and so forth. So we place each section of street, we give it a hierarchy based on its usage. So clearly, if there's a road with a school or a hospital or some other sort of public amenity, then that would be further up the hierarchy. So the inspections from a safety perspective, we carry them out more frequently on the busier roads, the roads that feed into more public amenities and so on. So every street has been graded, and generally it also follows that because the traffic flow is greater, then the need to resurface or to carry out preventative treatment tends to be come around quicker on those streets simply because of the usage.
I think Councillor Buckley's got a question. Thank you.
I think I've forgotten what they were, Chair, actually.
You were too quick.
It reminds me of when my wife was doing some campaigning about 10 years ago in Moortown. And a woman said, my cul-de-sac's not been resurfaced since 1957. So whether that was true or not, I don't know. It didn't look that bad, actually.
This wasn't in 1958, was it?
I just had three quick questions, actually. And the first one, I think you're bound to say it's safe. You made reference to the Wyker having the 5-year settlement for highways and being slightly higher than previously. Is that money actually there and physically ring fenced? Do they have their sweaty hands on it? So, for instance, it can't be taken away. That's question if there were cuts. That's question number one. Question two, in a similar vein, really. I read yesterday that the active travel fund could be vulnerable to a cut of some description. And if that was to be reduced, would that have any effect on your budget? Or is that completely separate? And then the third question, something completely different. We've had a spate in Old Woodley of family homes being demolished and replaced by huge mansions on the same plot. And it involves a lot of work, a lot of building work, lorries, and so on. If they damage the highway, is it a given that they then have to pay for the repair to the road?
So I'll try and take those in order. In terms of the Wyker monies, the value that I referenced earlier, the way the Wyker bid was put together, there are several different strands. So there's a mass transit element, there's a highway maintenance element, and others besides. So for highway maintenance specifically, the value across the 5 local authorities is £248 million, I think, if I remember it correctly, across the 5 authorities for 5 years. In Leeds, we then receive a proportion of that relative to the length of our network. So in terms of other aspects of the Wyker monies, that money should be coming specific to highways maintenance. Those monies should be coming direct to the authority through Wyker. Now, for this particular year, we've had confirmation for quarters 1 and 2, and we're expecting confirmation for 3 and 4 within the next couple of months. But alongside that, we should then also get a level of certainty for years 2 to 5 that we've never previously had, because we used to get it annually and we were waiting and we were pushing, can we have confirmation? We should get the next 4 years around the same time. There's been a little bit of to and fro in this year because it's the first year of this 5-year settlement. I think once we've settled that. With your second part of your question on the active travel, I've no expectation that if one particular element is reduced or adjusted, it will have any effect on the maintenance element. Now, I believe in the early days there was several conversations around how the 900 and some million should be split across the various elements. And one thing that was generally consistent was the monies that was there for highways maintenance needs to be, as agreed, pretty much from the outset. So I don't expect that to be at risk. And then in terms of the third element, so yes, we do have monies that if it is considered due to works, associated with developments, for example, if it's lorries going backwards and forwards, then we can look to accelerate or bring some monies in advance to assist with those works. One of the irony of it is we do quite often, when we get knowledge of a forthcoming development, we will take a decision on whether we need to delay any works that we've maybe got planned on a particular route, so that we don't resurface a road, only for it to then be deteriorating quicker because there's HTVs up and down. And that can be frustrating because obviously it's already in a poor state, it deteriorates quicker, and then there's an expectation that we'll address it. But we would prefer to wait until the development's finished. That said, we always have a requirement to continue to inspect those roads from a safety perspective and to intervene and address any immediate safety risks. But if that is felt to be associated with the work, we would look to recover some of those funds.
So just to be clear then, the developer, excuse me, the developer would, in that circumstance, he would actually pay for the road to be resurfaced.
Not necessarily developer directly, but monies that have been secured on the back of the development. We can have access to that, but it certainly wouldn't be the developer directly.
Yes, councillor Cohen.
Thank you. So when you say money that's been reserved, you mean through a 106
Yes.
predominantly?
Yeah.
So in lots of applications, certainly nothing in the range that councillor Buckley talked about. Would there be any money reserved? So if I'm understanding what you're telling us correctly, a development can take place, significant damage to the highway, the verge, the pavement can occur as a result of that development, but Leeds City Council doesn't have the ability to go against the developer who's caused that damage to reinstate the public highway.
It's not so much directly through the developer. What monies have been set aside.
No, I'm sorry. I asked you a really clear question. In the event that monies haven't been set aside, which is normal for most developments, unless they are large scale developments where you might see a highway contribution. Is it correct? Am I understanding what you're telling me, that the council doesn't have the ability to require somebody to pay for damage that they have done to the highway?
Not directly.
Councillor Bitsy, were you indicating, or yes, and then we'll come to you, Matthew.
Okay, do you want to come back now? You mentioned that communication is one of the key elements. I would have to say that probably I would agree with you on that one, on the grounds that it does seem to be particularly one of the aspects that does struggle with at the moment. And I think it's particularly relevant when projects which are scheduled don't happen, or when elements involved in that project don't seem to know that it's happening either. So whether you have a resurfacing scheduled and it is to cut off a road, and the waste management don't know that that is happening. And that has happened twice in our area within a week. So in other words, we're fine with the bin collections because actually the road resurfacing hasn't happened on time. So that's actually been a bonus, the fact that it hasn't happened on time. The fact that residents also weren't actually given letters, which they were promised about this, has been a difficulty. So I agree with you, communication is the most important element. So how are we going to improve that? Because what's happening is that the right hand doesn't know the left hand exists, never mind what it's doing.
I mean, certainly, you know, if those communications are not being issued, then that's something clearly need to offer an apology for. If you can let me have those specific locations, I'd like to take them back in terms of using them as an example of what went wrong in this particular instance. Certainly the team that oversee works that are carried out by external contractors, they have quite a specific process in terms of nowadays, for example, all streets require a permit. Traditionally in the past, it was only certain types of streets, but all streets now require a permit, so they have to have the permit in place. And that will then trigger a series of events in terms of communication. But if that's failing, then I need to understand why that's happened and whether it was specific to a particular location, a particular individual, or a particular type of work. But certainly that shouldn't be the case.
Ian, I think we can certainly furnish you with some emails which will give you those details that you require.
Yeah, no, that would be useful. Thank you.
The point is that my point would be that it isn't just one instance. I think there is a breakdown in a system, and that then actually creates more problems for all parties involved in that way. Thank you.
And was there a final question from you, Councillor Robbins?
There was indeed. Thanks. Yeah. One of the biggest frustrations that I often hear from residents is when utilities companies, broadband companies come out, dig up the highway, and about a week later, the highway starts being dug up again. It's just been resurfaced, or you've just done a resurface, and that takes place. Now I know that goes out through contract management. There's processes in place there. Question one is, are we doing enough to coordinate and streamline that process so that there isn't disruption to the network? And question two, which depending on your answer may have a follow-up, is that where there is a fail that takes place and they overrun or it doesn't work and they have to come back out, there is a fine process that's in place, I understand. How is that fine process issued, and is the money ring-fenced to the ward where it took place?
Okay, so I mentioned previously to one of the other questions that we have a permit scheme. So anybody, and that includes the city council, anybody that wants to excavate within the public highway have to obtain a permit. That hasn't always been the case. It was specific to certain locations, certain types of roads, but now all streets require a permit. That has been a big challenge for the departments in terms of being able to, for want of a better description, police that. Colleagues in our network management team that oversee that, and they have certainly increased their number, both in terms of dealing with the permits coming in, and in terms of the scenario you've suggested, inspectors going out and being able to actually make sure that developers, utilities companies, and our own teams are actually working within the requirements of the permit scheme. Permit numbers are supposed to be displayed on all sites, so it should be fairly easy for people to be able to report those in. But with any system, you know, there are organisations who try to get around that system. They suggest perhaps the works are emergency type works when they're not, because there's slightly different ways in dealing with those requests and so on. One of the inspector's roles is to go out. Every permit has a start and an end date, or an opening and a close date. If there's overstays, if they start early, if they extend beyond the area of work that's been agreed, and so on and so forth, there is a mechanism where a fixed penalty notice would be applied. They're not. We don't apply them specifically internally. We'd effectively be fining ourselves. But the actual the report of where a fixed penalty notice would be issued is recorded, so we can use that to try and improve the process. But certainly with external organisations, we do apply a fixed penalty, or a fixed penalty is applied. I'm not aware that money is ring fenced to the location where the offence took place. I believe it's dealt with centrally and is held centrally. But I think from our perspective within highways and transportation, our aspiration and expectation is the fewer fixed penalties that are issued, the better the network's operating and the better the process is operating. So we would prefer not to be issuing any in an ideal world, but we don't live in an ideal world.
And I will stop after this because it'll be Thursday before we know it otherwise. I mean, I've got some sympathy with some of the companies that are doing this. So if you look like when you're going out and doing some of the dig works, you find problems that can take longer, but they apply for the
Absolutely
the time,
they can apply for an extension.
So they apply for an extension. So there is a process in place, and I think for having that extension so that there's not a second round of disruption, a resurfacing coming back out again, makes sense. What I do think is, and I would urge highways to go back and consider it, that where those fixed penalty notices are issued, that the community where that's experienced should see some of the benefit from it. I don't think it should necessarily be going back into the big central pot that is Leeds City Council. I think if you've got an area that's seen an issue, that funding being ring fenced to that area so that community groups, social groups, other highways projects perhaps in the area see the benefit. And I hope you consider that.
Thank you. Councillor Harron.
Can you let us know, not now, how many such notices were issued and how much money was collected on them under that regime?
I'll certainly try and get that information to you, Councillor.
Well, you must know.
I know it's not a
Somebody
team.
knows.
Yeah,
We'd all like
absolutely.
to know that, wouldn't we?
Yeah,
How much
because
have we
it's all
worked?
electronic, so we'll know exactly how many notices have been issued in a given period. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ian, for your time. It was very comprehensive. And I would urge councillor colleagues that if there are any streets that you need to let him know about, please let him know about it in the next couple of days. And then you can get on with the job that you should be doing. Okay, thank you very much.
Chair.
You're of course are welcome to stay if you wish, but you don't have to.
Thanks, I'll leave.
No. Right, item 10, Outer North East Community Committee update report. If there are any questions about the report, speak now, please. Councillor Cohen.
Not a question, Chair, but a comment, so apologies. Just to say, I read this report and it just shows how much great work is going on within all of our wards. And it shows that when you have councillors that live and work hard in their local areas, what can be delivered on the very, very small amount of money that the administration deigned to give us. So I just wanted to make that comment.
I think Preet would actually like to highlight a couple of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to go through the entire report, but I do want to bring the council's attention to from paragraph 3 to 57, and just echoing what Councillor Cohen has said, that there has been a lot of activity since the last community committee. And I am just going to pull some headlines, and I will probably invite a couple of the councillors just to give a bit more background and context. The first highlight or headline that I want to raise is the Leeds Festival Working Group. We've had a number of meetings and site visits and a debrief since the last community committee. And at the debrief, we did collect some comments from residents, officers, etc. And what they have said that this year was really positive in terms of noise nuisance. I think the Environmental Health Service, they've received 0 complaints about the noise level. Having the East Leeds orbital route open has really helped with the traffic flow between villages. One of the actions that did come out of the last meeting was that everybody recognised how valuable the working group was, and they do actually want to keep that going for next year. So I just want it to be minuted, and maybe with agreement with the councillors that they would like this group to carry on. So if that could be minuted, that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Is everybody happy for that to continue? I'm looking at Matthew because you were co-chairing it. Everybody's nodding and yeah.
Is that we continue as co-chairs, Chair?
You say so, Matthew.
If you allow me.
So the outcome of that, Preet, is that yes, we will continue with that working group. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 17 onwards, there was loads of activities happening over summer. We had Mini Breeze, we had the Allwoodley and the Wetherby Rhinos. We also had the very first Harewood Jubilee Games. I will invite Councillor Robinson if he wants to say anything in terms of that, and I will also invite Councillor Cohen if he wants to say anything in regards to the Leeds Rhino Summer Camp.
Be brief and just say it was hugely successful. Credit to Councillor Stevenson for putting in a lot of the work, and to the schools, John Smeaton and those local schools, for getting involved. All the kids really enjoyed the day, and I hope we can continue it.
Yeah, we did. It was actually our third year working in partnership with Leeds Rhinos. Bless you. And what we find year after year is the take up goes and increases. What's really heartwarming is it's not just the numbers that are increasing, but the number of girls that are now taking part, the diversity of people that are taking part, the age mix. It's phenomenal to see. The Rhinos are great. So we have 2 camps. We have a sports camp that runs all the way through the summer, but then we also have a drama camp that they bring a provider to do, because not everybody wants to do sports. I'm not saying that would have been me, but I might have done the drama.
The wing.
No. You mean on the wing or in the wings? Because you see drama. But it does go from strength to strength. The challenge, as ever, is meeting the funding requirement, because obviously the cost of doing this goes up, and the amount of funding that we are given, candidly, relatively goes down. So we're hopeful that we will be able to do it again next year. When I speak to young people across the ward, I go along to visit over a couple of days, when they do an amazing feedback report, and when I speak as well to parents, who ultimately are the people paying the taxes that pay for this, the feedback is universally incredibly positive. Summer is really, really expensive. Whatever your financial situation, the summer holidays are incredibly expensive, particularly when you have a number of children. And that in Woodley, and I know in Wetherby, we have something that is incredibly cost effective, is hugely appreciated by parents, and it's huge and appreciated by the young people that attend to. So I think it's absolute credit to the rhinos that they work with us, and frankly, there's I think a degree of credit that has to go to us as councillors for making sure it happens, because it's really important.
And I would certainly echo those points from Wetherby. The feedback that we've had and the children that were there was the same kind of differences. There were many, many more girls turning up, and the guys were saying that people used to think it was all about rugby. Well, it's not. It's hardly anything to do with rugby at all. There's this huge diversity and range of activities that they undertake. So all that feedback's been absolutely fabulous. Did you want to come back, Councillor?
Yeah, just one story that I heard. So as you probably know, the Rhinos send some of the ladies' first team specifically as role models for some of the girls, and I am told that actually now some of the girls who went to the camp have now actually taken up ladies rugby. Some of them were quite good players, and so I shall look forward to seeing them both at Leeds Rhinos, and then hopefully in a few years at the Rugby League World Cup.
Thank you, Preet. Moving on.
Thank you, Chair. Just to finish off with a couple of things, paragraph 38, tomorrow is the Town and Parish Council Forum. It is being held at Wetherby Town Hall. The agenda has been sent out, and there will be a discussion in regards to the cost of living, and we'll have the police there for a Q&A session. And finally, I just want to invite Councillor Richards and Councillor Harrington in regards to paragraph 46 and 47, the Boston Spa Village Hall opening and the Deepdale official opening. Thank you.
Okay, the Deepdale official opening was the park at Deepdale in Boston Spa. We took a decision some time ago that it would be renamed the Councillor Gerald Wilkinson Park. He was instrumental in getting the play area built and refurbished. His family were able to attend, and they were particularly moved by the event and were very grateful for the fact that we'd actually asked for that to happen. Boston Spa Village Hall official opening, we were really, really pleased that we've been able to help with the refurbishment of that village hall. And Linda and myself were invited to go along. We didn't quite realise that we were supposed to be cutting the ribbon when we got there, but there we go. And the work that they've done in there is absolutely phenomenal for not a huge amount of money. Really, in the great scheme of things, but the whole area has been transformed. The art festival that was there on the day that we opened, it was absolutely huge. It had so many hundreds of visitors over the long weekend, but they were very, very grateful for the fact that we had been able to find funding, which, as Councillor Cohen has already alluded to, is not always the most generous amount of money that we get. But have you got anything else to say, Linda, about that? No.
All I'd say is that certainly the refurbishment of the Boston Spa Village Hall has enabled that to become a genuine location of choice for a wide range of activities. Obviously, the Wise Cafe has been a regular there already, and the beer festival is there this weekend. So the fact is, you know, it serves all needs. And I think there is a recognition that in the villages, it is particularly important to have those hubs so that the surrounding smaller villages, which don't necessarily have the same provision, can actually access that. So I think that's recognised as well.
Thank you for that. So the next item on the agenda is item number 12.
Thanks, Chair. I won't go into the finance report. I'll take it as read. There's just 2 applications that have come. One is for Alwoodley Ward. It's for Santa's visit, and that's for £3,000 to the Moortown West Residents Association. Are we in agreement to support that?
So yes, I think it's important. It is a significant sum of money, but you'll appreciate with the cost of fuel, Santa getting across on the sleigh is not insignificant. But over a 2-day period, and we're truly honoured that Santa makes the time in his busy schedule, especially at this time of year. Santa is visiting Alwoodley over the Saturday and the Sunday, has a huge event on the Saturday where there's a Christmas woodland walk, and then on the Sunday travels around Alwoodley meeting young people, and not just young people. Last year there was a whole range of visitors came to Santa's mobile grotto, and we're really excited that he's once again visiting, and so this funding bid has been put in. I do have to say, Chair, and I'm delighted that both of my colleagues are here, because as you will know, I have some minor involvement in this particular project in terms of Santa being Santa's official liaison in Alwoodley, something I feel delighted and honoured to be, but I am not able to vote in this matter.
I think I ought to say, Chair, that Councillor Coyne is officially the only Jewish Santa Claus in England.
I'm not sure that's true.
Right, so are we happy for that to be approved then, please, Alwoodley? Yes, everybody's saying yes, right, fine, thank you very much.
And the second one is for the Harewood councillors. It's Barwick and Elmy and Scholes Parish Council. They've put funding bid in for £1,000 for some festive lights, Christmas lights.
Which will be approved. I think it's a great project and something that we support. No, it's Santa's official representative from Alwoodley has no purview on this matter.
Okay, thank you. That's approved as well, Preet. Thank you very much. Okay, so item number 12 is the date and time of the next meeting.
Within your finance report, could I request there's an alteration on page 48 in the table, which is the wellbeing revenue budget. The Queen's Platinum Jubilee benches for Harewood weren't Platinum Jubilee benches. They have been altered to become memorial benches. I don't know if that's the case in other areas as well, but I think that's it's well worth us updating that. I'm also aware that, and I'd wanted to just double check with Preet, some funding was made available in the past for Jubilee coronation bits that are there. Is discussions underway on that from the council centrally about any funds that will be available?
Is this for the coronation?
Yeah.
Yeah, no discussions have been had yet.
I would just add that Wetherby Ward, we have told all the parish councils that they are no longer going to be Jubilee benches, but there will be commemorative benches. So, and we all of the parish councils are going to let you know where they would like them to be cited. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, date and time of the next meeting, it's Monday the 12th of December, at 5:30, but the venue is to be confirmed and we will let you know that as soon as we have it. Civic, definitely civic hall. Okay, so that concludes the business for today's meeting. Hope you all have a safe journey home.